So let's now start wiring up our post item to the post grid, and let's add some dummy data. To wire it up, keep in mind that in the posts grid we get posts through props, and that will probably be an array full of objects that describe a post. So the assumption is that an individual post in that list has all the data post item needs. We can make that assumption because we are writing that code. So we'll just have to make sure that this is the case later. Now post item, this component, wants a post prop. Hence now in posts grid, we can add that post prop here and pass the post, which we get here in this map method, into post item through that post prop. Now we expose that data to post item. Now since we map, we should also add the key prop that's required by React.js to efficiently render and update that list. And we can set this to some unique identifier, and every post will have a slug property, which is the unique identifier of a given post, and therefore that is what we can use here. Now we got that, now we need some dummy data. For this, let's first of all go to featured posts in the homepage folder, because that is where we now want to use that posts grid. So in here, we want to output posts grid. And for this, you should make sure that you add the import to posts grid to that component. And now there, we need to set the posts prop on post grid. We need to set that because in the posts grid component, we are extracting that posts prop here. So we want to set this, and in featured posts, I actually also expect that I get my posts data through props. Now that's a long chain of props, and we could therefore of course also kind of consider using context or Redux to avoid this prop drilling. But here I'm actually fine with it because it is a chain that makes a lot of sense. And posts grid, for example, shouldn't be tied to one specific context anyways, because we will reuse that component in different places. So that should definitely receive its data through props instead of context. And hence I'll leave it like this. Therefore, in featured posts, I'll set the posts prop on posts grid to props.posts. And yeah, that's a lot of posts, but that is what this application is about in the end. So now featured posts also has a posts prop that needs to be populated. And let's therefore now finally go to the place where the prop chain will end, and that is the index.js file in the pages folder. Here below hero, I want to output my featured posts, and therefore you need to make sure that you do add that import to import the featured posts component. And here we now set our posts prop. Now later, we will get posts with get static props when we have actual posts which we load. For the moment, we don't have that. For the moment, to just see something, I'll add a dummy posts array here, which I'll set as a value for the posts prop, and will then replace that later. Now, dummy posts will be an array full of dummy post data, so full of dummy post objects. And now every post object here should in the end have these properties, because that's what we rely on later. We want to have a title, image, excerpt, date, and slug. Hence here in index.js, we want to add that. We want to add a slug, a title, an image, an excerpt, and our date. So all those properties we are relying on here in post item. 5 props there, 5 properties here. Now, since it's dummy data, we can come up with any slug and any values in general we want. The slug should be a text with the words separated by dashes and no special characters. So here I'll have like a slug of getting started with Next.js, and then I'll add a title of getting started with Next.js. So that could be a blog post title. Then an image, which I'll name getting started next.js, just like this, and then also .png. I will soon provide this file to you so that we have this image. Then add an excerpt where I say something like, Next.js is the React framework for production. It makes building full stack React apps and sites a breeze and ships with built-in server-side rendering. Now you can come up with any text you want. It just shouldn't be too long because it's just a short preview text in the end. And then we'll add a date, which should be in the format of year-month-day. That will be a date which then later can be parsed and used by the date constructor. So that's some dummy data, and I'll add more than one post here. I'll repeat this 4 times, and I'll just edit the slug slightly. So getting started with Next.js 2 and 3 and 4, so that this is unique. And all the other data is duplicated for the moment, just because I don't want to waste time setting up dummy data here. We'll just need this to see if our grid works correctly. So that is what it is. That is the dummy posts I want to work with, and that's the dummy posts passed to featured posts. Now, in order to see anything on the screen, we now need that image, which we are relying on. And I do provide a dummy image for you. You can use that image, which you find attached, the getting started next.js PNG file. You can download that and add it in your public images posts folder. There add this getting started next.js PNG file, which is a little dummy file I created for you. Of course, you can also add your own files. And now double check that the value you set up for the image property here in the dummy posts data is equal to that image file name you just added, that you have no typo here. With that, we should have everything we need. If we now save that, I get an error if I reload because I forgot to set the ref property. Makes sense. In a post item, I'm wrapping the entire post in the end with a link, but I'm not linking anywhere. I forgot to set my ref. And of course, we want to set ref here. Now, what should be the link or the path this link leads to, though? It should, in the end, be the individual page for this selected post. So we want to load this slug page here in the end for that concrete post slug. Hence, here we want to derive that path dynamically. And I'll do that by adding a separate constant, link path, which again is a template literal, where we start with /posts, because that slug file is in the posts folder in the pages folder, and then /, and then some dynamic value. Here we want to use the slug then, because that slug, that unique human and search engine friendly text, that should be part of the URL. And then it's this link path which we use here. So that is something we have to add. And once we do add this, we do render featured posts. Now the cards are showing up. The image is not though. And that makes sense if we take another look at post item and the image path we're constructing here. I point at images, posts, and then the slug of the post as an extra subfolder, and then the image file name. Now I have the image directly in the posts folder, so that extra slug folder in between is missing. We should add it. We should go back to index.js, and then add our slugs here, which we have in the dummy data as subfolders in posts. So I'll add a subfolder with a slug of getting started with next.js, and I'll drag the image in there. And I'll repeat that for my other dummy posts. Of course, it's always the same image, but still, to be able to render this, I'll add more subfolders in the posts folder. So not inside of the other slug folder, but in the post folder. There I will add more subfolders. with those different slug names as folder names, because that is required to find the image correctly. And then we can drag and drop the image by copying it into those other slug subfolders, so that we have the same image 4 times in those different subfolders for those different slugs. Now the image should be fetched correctly. If we save this again and load localhost 3000, we see it. Now what we also see is that here on this big screen, it's a little bit too small. If I open up the DevTools and I resize this, you see it doesn't really fit my card that nicely. It doesn't really fit in there, and that's not the behavior I want. To fix this, we can go back to the post item where we render that image and add the special layout prop. Now I mentioned that we have a couple of values we can set there, and the default is intrinsic, which means the width and height we specify here is the width and height which is being used. Now we want to set this to responsive instead. By setting this, it will fill out the entire surrounding container, this div in this case, which has certain CSS styles that control its width and height, and then it will shrink and grow together with that container. So if we set layout to responsive, now that looks much better. Now we take the full available space as we move this around. Now, of course, it's up to you how exactly that should be styled. I just have some basic starting styles here. You can, of course, fine-tune this to change the size and fine-tune it to your exact requirements. I have some basic styling here, though, and as you see now, that doesn't look too bad. It is growing and shrinking, and we take advantage of this automatically optimized image. So with that, we have our featured posts being rendered here, and therefore the starting page of our blog is finished with that dummy data, but better than nothing. Now we can move on to the other pages and work on those. And I will move on to the posts page now, where I want to render all my posts.